The Fossores Chapter House is the world's first headquarters for Christian ministerial innovation, bringing preachers, leaders, and innovators together to collaborate on new liturgies, resources, and responses to the challenge of our times. This podcast explores the ever-changing era of perpetual upheaval, in which effective ministry requires constant imagination, creativity, and change. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us in episode 1, season 2 of the Chapter House podcast. I'm here with my friend Ken Brewer. What'd you say, hey, Ken?
Hello. Hi, David. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, tell them what you do, who you are, and where you're from, and how we
Okay, well, I'm originally from Michigan, Detroit area. I did not grow up in the church. I think I went to church just 2 times before I was 20. And both times I was drunk, so I don't know if that counts. and it was a Catholic church, so for some people it definitely doesn't count. Right? So, but then I became a Christian, went to Spring Arbor, majored in philosophy and religion, felt a call to ministry, went to Asbury Theological Seminary down in Kentucky, was feeling called into teaching, higher ed. So I went to Princeton Theological Seminary and then to Drew University and University of Tübingen for 4 semesters. So I've pastored for 16 years. So I was an assistant youth pastor, and then I had my own church out in New Jersey. I lived out there about 20 years, and but I got a teaching. My first teaching job was out in New Jersey, but I got involved in a church plant. So I was on a launch team, which gave me new skills I hadn't learned, and then was called. Spring Arbor called me up, wanted to know if I was still conservative enough to teach there, and I said, "You can be the judge of that." Yeah. But anyways, I had a job. I didn't really want it, but I went and interviewed, and they said, "You got the job." So in 2003. We moved here, and I've been teaching ever since. So I'm professor of theology and chair of the Department of Theology.
Yeah, and didn't you tell me you have 4 master's degrees in theology? Is that right?
3 master's degree and a PhD.
And a PhD. Yeah. Well, so. What does that count for? Where's your PhD from? Is it Princeton?
Drew University, but I actually did my doctoral work over in Germany because I went there. I actually worked with the person I was researching. World famous Roman Catholic theologian named Hans Küng, and I was looking at the role of Christian faith and other religions and religious pluralism and the uniqueness of Jesus. And that actually came out of my youth ministry work because I was a youth pastor in a church in East Brunswick, which was 40% Jewish. And I had a youth group of 90 senior high kids. And 10 of them were secularized Jews. I had 3 Buddhists, 3 Muslims, a Hindu, and they were asking all the best questions. You know, all the other kids were, just believed what everybody told them, right? They were asking me questions about, Jesus and other faiths, and will he go to hell, and is there any truth, and all these things. And it was the first time I encountered that. And so my advisor at Drew was Dr. Thomas Oden, and he told me to for my dissertation to do something fresh because dissertation's going to take a while. And he said, "What's relevant?" I said, "All right, now I don't know how to answer a lot of these questions, know." So I dove into the study of that and looking for a topic, and a lot of people obviously have written on some of the major figures. And then Hans Küng has no dissertations on that. So I went and worked with him, and it was a great experience. I was there for 2.5 years.
I didn't know that. So because I'm a Jesus guy. I mean, there's some people that are Christian guys. There's some people that are God guys. There's some people that are church guys. Some people that are Holy Spirit guys. I'm a Jesus guy. I'm all the way a Jesus guy.
You don't have to choose, Dave.
Well, you know what I mean. Sometimes you talk to somebody, you talk about the uniqueness of Jesus. I mean, I get really concerned. I get burdened when I talk to other pastors, especially young pastors who are so passionate about anything, worship, justice, church, missiology, and somehow they miss out on the forest for the trees. And for me, if Jesus, if the name of Jesus, if the person of Jesus, if the achievement, the accomplishment of Jesus, all the Jesus stuff, if Jesus sitting in there, then he's my first love. You know? So Now that said, Stanley Hauerwas, the late great Stanley Hauerwas, I guess more late than great now. It's been a few years, but he posited. I thought this was so cool that a way better way to have ecumenical dialogue or interfaith dialogue was to talk pneumatologically instead of Christologically. So talk about the Spirit. Everybody's got the Spirit.
Yeah.
They
Well,
understand
there
it,
in the last 40 years, the amount of literature has just grown in this whole area,
Sure.
and recently, yes. Because Pentecostalism has gone worldwide, there's a sense in which the Spirit, Jesus is in one place at one time, right? And, God is a missional God. The Father sent the Son sent the Spirit sends us.
Sends the church, yeah.
And so the Spirit is alive and well around the world. Yeah. And so there's a lot of reflection on what the Spirit is doing in preparation for the gospel.
Sure.
And there's all kinds of stories out there. Muslims having visions and walking and finding Jesus. You get
a kick out of this. Somebody sent me a text after church on Sunday, and they said, "Well, I guess the Holy Spirit has finally returned to West Winds." And it was because we sang music they liked that day. But I just thought that was so funny. Like, I didn't know he was gone.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. But you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear, right?
Yeah. Well, I thought we might talk about a couple things because I miss you, and COVID's been so crazy, and I just want to talk. I don't have a big agenda, but but let's start with the big one, because you're a great blend in my estimation of a passionate Jesus follower, Spirit filled. Operating in your gifts and an academic. That's a really rare blend, and one that is attractive and affirming. What do you think the church needs to hear? I mean, we've been in COVID for.
You mean now?
Yeah, we've been in COVID for 900 months.
I know.
What do you think we need to hear?
Well, I think the church needs to hear that God created us for community, and I think the church needs to hear it's okay to be suffering, grieving, longing to be with others, to be together as a body. Because, singing's great, but it's always better corporate, right? So, especially that. We can listen to you and get the sermon, but it's really hard to replicate that worship experience. Yeah. But I think it's okay that it's okay to lament, to grieve. I think not only with the deaths, 460,000 some, but the job losses, people hungry, people hopeless, isolated. That I think that the people need to hear, we're all in this together and we're experiencing this, and this is not how God created us. That longing to be together is God-given. And I think, as I reflect on it, I think maybe when we come out of this, it might be helpful for churches to have sort of a corporate lament and name the names, name your losses. Just acknowledge, rather than just sort of passing over this time. I've been challenged during this time. I've been reflecting a lot on Jesus' time in the wilderness. And it was not only difficult in that he's being tempted by the devil while misinterpreting scripture, but the loneliness. And so my challenge has been, how can I find God in this desert? Because it's mentioned the Spirit drives Jesus right into the wilderness, and he's Spirit led, and I think that's
into
also,
a sucky place.
Yeah, into a sucky place, which spiritually
place.
means you shouldn't interpret, the difficulties in life to be absent of God or spirituality. That it's not always the mountaintop, or I think a lot of people paint a picture when you become a Christian. You're going to get on one of these Carnival cruise ships and just lay back, and life is easy, and you're in your Speedo and take a little swim. You stop and shop.
I would have guessed differently for this podcast.
But the Spirit, first thing after the baptism and his anointing with the Spirit is Spirit-led people are led into wildernesses at the time. And I think that's where we're at. Yeah. And that's part of the spiritual journey. I feel like...
well, I just started teaching on numbers at Westwinds, precisely because I go, this seems like 40 years of wondering, when is this going to be over?
Exactly.
And why are we eating the same thing? And why can't we go anywhere? And, how come everybody's complaining and we're all sick and we don't trust our leaders? And
it's a mess.
Right. Oh, man.
Yeah.
No, that's good. Yeah, and I've often been impatient with Christians who want to use lament because it seems so. We're in the most prosperous time of human history and the most prosperous nation in the world. We have access to every conceivable resource, and there's this sort of malaise common to youth in particular. That lament feels self-serving, feels like masturbation, like spiritual masturbation. But now it's so different. So I really take that as a good check.
Well, all the excess we live with in our culture, it points to when something like this happens, our poverty. We have been relying and we're discontent and. Blaise Pascal, the philosopher, said the problem with humans is they have never learned to be content sitting in their room. And, we got to be distracted by amusements and, all kinds of things. And I think that's the hard lesson right now is that even though we live in abundance, it can deceive us. In ways that we don't cultivate a deep spirit. And connect and see that, everything can be taken away.
Well, and there's a funny difference between, I'm teasing this out, abundance and excess. I mean, because an apple tree is abundant. An apple tree in bloom it's fecund, it's fruitful, it's lush, and there's like that kind of abundance. I think is so godly. Very different if you show up to the apple tree and there's gold apples on it because somebody's been decorating it for Christmas. And that's just and I think so much of what we've had is trinkets. And the sad part about right now, I mean, this is I wondered for a long time ago, why are we seeing revival? I mean, you got all these people who are being driven into their homes, like, for example, the underground Chinese church. I go, where's the revival? Where's the new forms of house church? Where's the prayer meetings? Where's the people? And I go, we're all on our phones. Which I'm not a troglodyte. I'm not anti-technology, but I go, just trying to help people understand that 17, 18 hours in unmitigated access to your devices is not going to cultivate a deep spirit.
No, and unfortunately, I mean, Netflix and all these things are trying to fill those spaces where deep community, deep communion with God needs to be cultivated. And it takes discipline and intentionality to make that happen. And I know, I mean, I've struggled with, I'm rewatching shows on Netflix I watched 5 years ago. It's like I've exhausted everything,
I'm
right?
back to MASH and Friends.
How many times can you watch Breaking Bad? And it's like, wow, so
I get through it in a day.
And part of that is picking some disciplines that are going to help you be intentional. So I love what's being done at Westwinds with
the breviary,
matins and breviary. And for me, I pray it's a common book of prayer 3 times a day. And
that's good.
It's got some written structured prayers that help me just get some continuity to my thoughts. And then I can launch off into my extemporaneous prayers, but I really need that structure right now. So,
well, it's been really helpful for me to teach the breviary because I'm teaching right now 20 to 30 times a week.
Wow.
And I have a rule that I'll never repeat a sermon. I mean, you're going to talk on the same theme, but I'm never going to use the same outline. I'm never going to use the same structure. I'm never going to use the same hook. So for me, I'm in just out of necessity. I'm in the Bible so much right
Yeah.
now. And then
Yeah.
for the breviary, I've been writing invocations and benedictions, little poems
Mm-hmm.
to encapsulate the teaching. And that discipline has been a really good prayer discipline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to force, like you said, to force some structure into all this chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you're sitting around the house all day, every day, and now it's nice I can get out, I teach, but there's not a restaurant, all these activities. What do you do with your time? It's easy just to waste it, and
Right.
it's like,
to putter.
And so, well, it's fine. I mean, if you need it to be mentally healthy to watch,
Sure.
I mean, I'm on my phone as much as anybody else, but you got to carve out intentional time just to feed your spirit, and it's actually an opportunity to go deeper. Just like when Jesus,
Right.
I mean, he's at a level of, depth of aloneness,
Yeah.
and being confronted with evil, and so he overcomes what the people of Israel couldn't do.
Right. He relives.
Yeah,
the new Exodus.
And
so here's a question for you: Where do you think he goes in the desert? Is he totally by himself? I mean, he's got to have water, right? So he's got no food. He's got no Bible because there isn't one.
Yeah.
So he's not taking scrolls with him,
Right.
or papyri or whatever. So I mean, you think is he going places? Like, is he going to Qumran? Is he going to, or is he just like trying to get totally by himself?
Yeah. Well, he was by himself as much as we know. But I mean, I was in Israel last January for the first time. You've been in Israel?
No, I haven't been.
Oh, you haven't been to Israel?
3 times my trips have been canceled.
Oh.
Yeah. The Lord doesn't want me over.
Yeah. Can't go there.
Yeah,
Okay.
get out of here.
Well, once you go there and look at the terrain, it's really amazing because it varies. And, where they think he went is if you go east of, what we see in the New Testament, it's all desert terrain.
Yeah.
But not desert like Mexico desert. It's rocky. It's you don't really see cacti, that kind of thing.
Right.
Barren. It's just barrenness.
No trees.
Scrubby trees and
Like
dead
tumbleweed
trees.
kind of things.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
And rocks, not sand, right?
Rocks. There is sand, but it's mixed.
Yeah.
And just envisioning, Jesus just roaming around out there. One time I went on a 3-day silent retreat just by myself, and I'm an introvert, so I wasn't that afraid to do the thing. And it went by pretty quickly, but I was thinking 40 days, don't think I could do that. So I don't know. I mean, I imagine him enjoying nature. It actually gets cold in the desert.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Would he had a cave? I mean, what is it? Is he making a circle? Does he walk out in the desert, just sit down? Does he stand up?
Yeah.
Does he do push-ups? I mean,
I think it's really hard for us to imagine because being the people that we are in the culture we're really into productivity and effectiveness and efficiency.
Yeah.
So what's the point of wandering around by yourself for 40 days in the desert? Like, what production? What are you coming out of this with, right?
Well, purity, maybe, clarity,
And and so I don't know. I think he, So here's for me the good news. Jesus conquered loneliness.
Oh, that is good news.
He conquered loneliness and isolation and intense temptations. And I think he did that because the whole narrative is framed by being led by the Spirit, being driven by the Spirit. And then when he comes out, it says, first line, Luke 4:1, he's full of the Holy Spirit. So he learned this dependence, a deep level, not a superficial, happy, clappy, sort of spirit experience, but a deep one. The kind he talks about in John, where there's rivers of living water
flowing out of you.
And I think he tapped into that and walked it out, and
that's a good metaphor of us being reservoirs, and I think so many of us we get just enough for today. We're operating on a manna metaphor, where Jesus has got this super abundant supply, this a river, not a glass.
Yeah. So, So yeah, I think Hebrews tells us he suffered in every way like us, and identified, so he could identify and empathize with our humanity, the full range of human experience. And a large part of human experience is, what do you do with your loneliness? What do you do when you're alone? What do you do when no one's watching you?
He had less options to get into trouble than we do. I mean, I suppose he could have made buddies with Satan, but I think there's good evidence of Jesus' loneliness and his strength to overcome it in his relationships with women. I've often thought about this. I mean, Jesus breaks all the taboos, apart from the sexual mores, but he breaks all the social and relational and marital taboos with women. I think because he's lonely. But he never seems needy. I mean, when his exchange with the Samaritan woman at the well, his encounters with Mary Magdalene. I mean, he's intimate without being inappropriate. To the person.
Where do you learn that self-control? Right. If you could because he's not eating too. Remember.
Right.
So I always tell my students that are struggling with lust, try fasting. Because I can guarantee you your drive. Hunger drive is stronger than your sex drive. And to prove it, I usually say, if you end up screwing up, fast for 3 days. If you do it again, guarantee you're going to want some food. And that's going to override some things. But no, I think, that what you said, there is a difference between, I think, being alone and loneliness as well. Because periodically, I think I've counted 6 to 8 times the Gospels tell us Jesus went to a lonely place, or a place alone. So he needed it, he needed to get away from everybody. And as a pastor, you know what that's like. I mean, everybody's like, the very first episode in Mark's Gospel, he goes to Peter's mother-in-law and heals her of the fever, and everyone finds out he has healing power. Let's get this guy out in town, And he's out there, and it says, he went till late. And then the next verses, it tells us early in the morning while it's still dark, he got up and went to a solitary place. And what's interesting about these solitary places, I think, first of all, Jesus needed to do that. He didn't want to hang out with people all the time.
Right. No, so, I'm going to recharge my batteries here, guys.
So then it says, the disciples saw he was gone and went looking for him. And so when they find him, it's really interesting. Mark chapter 1, it says, everybody's been looking for you. Where are you? There's more ministry to do, right? And it always struck me as odd, Jesus' response, but he said, let's go somewhere else. And it's kind of like, so what does solitariness help us do? Is get reoriented. And I think it's Walter Brueggemann that talked about the Christian life as being orientation, disorientation, reorientation. And I think the solitary place helps us reorientate. If we'll use it.
If we use it.
If we'll use it.
Well, and that's I think right now every Christian is living a monastic life, but if we can see it that way. Because we're all stuck in a cell. We're all trapped in a cloister. But only a few are going to come out purified, sanctified, renewed, reoriented. And the great majority will come out, bewildered.
Disoriented. And this is a time period when everyone's feeling a bit disoriented. Things aren't the same.
Sure.
And I guess I would counsel people not to beat themselves up too much because this is a new experience. And
this is my first pandemic.
But to not waste the time,
redeem the time.
And even if to this point, what are we in month 9 or 10 of this thing? Even if you've wasted 8 months, I mean, how many more we got in front of us? Use the last 2, 3, 4. Redeem that. Redeem that time. So it's not a total waste.
No, and I think with the amount of time that we've had alone, I don't know how many people used to go to Westwinds or how many people are now. Let's call it easy numbers. It used to be 800 adults. Now it's 300 adults. It's such a big thing. But I bet of those 800 adults, I don't think there's 200 of them who are spending 30 minutes a day in quiet time alone with God. And so I go, and no judgment. I just go, if you're going to be spiritually healthy, if you're going to be on any sort of track toward maturity, there's got to be that stuff that's just you and God.
Yeah.
It's just however it works, whether it's Lectio Divina,
Sure.
whether it's praying in tongues, whether it's reading the Bible, whether it's whatever. It's just whatever the thing is that's just you and God. That's got to happen, or you're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been, talking to colleagues who are academics, and I've experienced this myself. I thought, well, at least I'll get some reading done,
Yeah.
But I found myself really unmotivated to read. I'm like, I got all this time,
Yeah.
and I'm usually busy, and I got a stack of books I want to get through, and so I think it's just a struggle all the way around. Everything's topsy-turvy, and we got to learn to navigate this, and I think maybe during this time that this reorientation, a good thing to think about is, okay, life's going to get busy and crazy, and how do I want to be different?
Yeah.
What needs to change, and how can I start now? Because change just doesn't happen by fiat. You have to be intentional.
My dad, before he died, one of his favorite scriptures to quote was out of Hebrews, that God is going to shake the foundations so that the things that cannot be shaken will remain.
Oh, yeah.
Which is such a great, I just think, like, what, with so much of my life, so much of our lives have been blown up.
Yeah.
What's left?
Yeah.
What's left? And what do I want to make sure? Like,
sure.
That's the thing I want to carry into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Who am I? And, how do I live in this pandemic and use it to be, the person God wants me to be? Where are those places? And maybe it's a time, you reflect on, just how busy that this is too much downtime, but man, when things crank up again, it's, running the baseball games, running your kids around, work, just busyness, just can swallow you up. And it's really hard to actually, listen to yourself when you're, on the Autobahn, driving. I remember I lived in Germany two years, and I was first time on the Autobahn. I thought, this is great. And there's basically, it just means highway in German. People think it's some special road. No, it just means the highway.
Yeah.
And so there's a slow lane for trucks and stuff. Then there's a middle lane where you weave and bob around people. And then the fast lane, you go as fast as you want.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a professor friend that came over to visit, and we were going to head to Berlin. And we were chatting and talking off the plane and getting in the car and all that. And then all of a sudden, let's get in the fast lane. So I'm driving, and I realize neither one of us are talking. And I'm got white knuckles, and I'm going like 120 miles an hour, and somebody come on my bumper and flash their lights, and I got to move over, and then they zip by. And then I realized our communications ceased because living in the fast lane, you don't have time for a broader.
I don't want to be distracted. I don't want you to show me a picture on your phone.
No, let me see your kids. No, I can't see. We'll die.
Oh man.
So how do we prepare to not ramp everything up to full speed?
Well, in church life, and this is one of the other things I want to talk about. Of course, it's not going to go back to the way it was. We don't know exactly how it's going to go. But I mean, church is topsy turvy.
Yeah.
And it's not going to the constraints and the intricacies, the booby trap of COVID is not going to disappear. But prior to next year.
Yeah. I was reading something recently where they estimate about 20% of people won't return.
The everything that I'm getting, and from leadership, and that, and all the emails I get say we should expect to have currently between 30 to 40% return, which we're about there, and ultimately only about 60 to 70%.
Oh wow, that's lower than I thought. Yeah. Why do you think that is? What are people? Here they are. Well, like me, I'm in a high risk area, so I've been erring on watching you on the screen, you know.
Yeah. I didn't know I was going to become a TV person. I would have done more with my teeth.
But you know, I'm planning to come back. I'm planning like, well, you know, I want to get reengaged. But why do you think so many people? What are they discovering either about church themselves, or are they just wandering off, or what's your take on it?
I mean, because I'm doing a lot of sort of parish pastoring these days. You know, now most of it's phone or Zoom.
Yeah.
You know, where you just go like, there's just not a lot of people to do the work anymore. So I'm texting everybody and calling everybody and trying to get around to everybody as much as I can. And most of what I hear is that people are either worried, you know, I'm not sure it's safe to come out of my house yet, or safe to re-engage, which I respect that. I get that. But an equal number of people, I think, have just got out of the habit.
Oh.
You know, I mean, if you grow up in church, you're in the habit. Or if something happens, you know, usually some kind of crisis where you go looking for God and you find a church, then you cultivate the habit.
Yeah.
But then when the habit is no longer available, you cultivate new habits.
Yeah.
And it's not that the new habits are necessarily more life-giving or more satisfying. I mean, it's not like staying at home in your pajamas on a Sunday morning is somehow feeding your soul. It's just that shift in gears again. It takes a lot of startup energy that I don't think most people, I think in the back of their heads, they intend to. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of people who intend to be involved in the life of a church and never are.
Yeah.
And lots of churchless Christians who are, and not all of them are, you know, sneering and cynical and bad. They're just
more apathetic or don't feel the church is relevant to where they're at.
Or it's unnecessary. You know, but the sad thing is when, I mean, the stories that we're hearing now in the last, say, couple of months, you know, call it since Christmas or around Christmas, is people coming back. I mean, faithful, Jesus-loving people finally coming, but they're coming back because something awful happened. And that's terrible. You know, like there was a Sunday maybe 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago where, you know, there's like 250, 300 people at church right now, you know, between multiple services. Yeah. And in one day, I had 3 stories of sexual assault. Oh, wow. In the home. Yeah. It's you're like that's, I probably didn't have 3 all of 2019. Sure. Yeah. But in one day, because things are so just toxic, so icky. Yeah.
Something related to that surprised me is like one of the reasons that get kids back in school is because of violence at home and sexual, you know, trauma, misconduct and no food. Yeah. And so this pandemic is revealing. It's a mirror of society, not just us as individuals. And I think. You know, a lot of people, because I'm a theologian, ask me, well, where's God in this whole thing? And I'm like, the Bible doesn't really deal with questions about where's God in the midst of evil. Yeah. I look at Genesis where, you know, Joseph is told there's going to be a famine coming. Yeah. Right? He interprets the dreams. Yeah. He doesn't speculate philosophically. Why is God and you all these bad things happening? Yeah. What do? He prepares. He gets ready because there's gonna be 7 years of plenty and 7 years lean. Yeah. And he prepares. There's no speculation, you know. Yeah. And the same thing you find in Acts. It's interesting. Chapter 8, Agabus, the prophet, gets a similar. It's going to be a famine coming. Yeah. And what do you read? The next verse is that the disciples got themselves ready of how they could help, and then you see Paul going around taking collections, but there's no, you know, speculation about why is God doing this. Well,
even in Revelation, you get that. You get the 2 witnesses who, you know, their numbers coming up. You know that the church is going to be persecuted and scattered, and they're not told, you know, where is God. It's more like, when is God? Yeah, he's coming.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Persevere is the whole. Yeah, and that's what we're doing, learning perseverance.
Well, the word tribulation, we often translate is it solipsis? The ellipsis? I don't know how you say it.
I don't remember. Yeah. I'm not that great of a scholar.
I know like 3 Greek words, and I'm going to work them all in right now. Yeah. But the word means pressure. And that's, you know, when you put pressure on something, the things that are inside of it come out. And that's what's happening in the world. Right? Yeah. The pressure of COVID is revealing ugliness in the home. And it's also revealing virtue in the home. I'm at with it because maybe not an equal number, but there are some families at Westwinds that are they're gorgeous right now. They're totally glorified. Because the pressure happens and it turned them into diamonds.
Yeah. Well, isn't that the case? I mean, I think, I just taught a class last fall on the problem of evil and suffering. And one of the things we discovered is suffering, tribulation, these things bring out the worst in some people.
Yeah.
And they bring out the best in some people, And I think the analogy of fasting works here. When you fast, I had a guy tell me, you find out what you're full of when you fast. Because I for a long time, I used to fast once a week because it was every spiritual guy in history did it. Right. And it was the worst day of the week. I was grumpy. I had a headache. I wanted my coffee. I was snippy. And so I was talking to a guy. He's like, well, fasting helps you know what you're full of. And I think same thing, this pressure. When we're suffering of that, we're seeing what some people are full of. They're going in the store and buying all the toilet paper, for God's sakes. And other people are taking care of people, calling people, making sure you're okay, And I was talking to a friend of mine from New Jersey, and she was like, the whole family there's 6 of them in the house. Jeez. And said the first couple of weeks they were all on their phones isolated, but they've had to put their phone down and just all of a sudden having conversations they've never had before. And she's been intentional about, let's cultivate, family life. And so some people, this is an opportunity to do that or show the ugliness,
With all the changes that are happening in the church, and the same things happen. Church is going under pressure. We find out what the churches are full of. We find out the true character and nature of the church. Church is going to take some new forms. To be, I think, more house churches. I think maybe more cell churches, more Bible study churches. What do you think counts as a church?
Well, I could give you a historically theological answer to that because there are certain marks of the church that Calvin, to me, truncated everything. He says, where the gospel's faithfully preached and the sacraments, truly administered. Uh-huh. And I think that's too small.
Too simple?
Yeah, Luther had 7 points. He included suffering, by the way, as a mark of the church.
Really?
Yes. Oh, and worship as well. So you have both doxology and suffering as marks of the church. But at its core, church is the body of Christ. It's the family of God. All the imagery in the New Testament. I think there's, I've got a book, Images of the New Church in the New Testament. I think there's 87 different imageries.
Yeah. It's a great little resource.
Yeah, and it's like I like the image of a body. No, we're a body. We're in this together, and you find it in Romans 12. You find it in 1 Corinthians 12. Paul likes that metaphor. But I think at its essence, look what happens right after Pentecost. They continue in the apostles' teaching. They continue in the fellowship. They break bread. Yeah. They pray. I think that's baseline.
Yeah.
And then, signs and wonders happen. But to me, the biggest miracle is generosity.
Yeah.
They start caring for people, right, who don't have. And the Lord adds to their number. And those were house churches,
Yeah.
And so to me, I like the Acts 2 model. I know every church wants to be in Acts 2, but they tend to veer off, as you were mentioning earlier, either a Holy Spirit side or social justice or this or that. And it's like, no, it's a whole mix.
What's been really cool for me? I mean, we had to make some staff cuts at West Winds. So we don't have any agent stage ministers anymore. We don't have kids people. We don't have youth people. So we're scrambling. And we were getting ready to do a big youth church launch, I've always had a heart for youth ministry, but now I got nobody to do it. So I thought, Lord, I don't have any time. I don't have any spare energy.
Yeah.
But I do have 2 teenagers.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'll see who will help me. And then doing youth ministry on Sunday nights has been so great, particularly to be able to pray with them.
Yeah.
And teach them to pray for each other. It's the prayer that's been my favorite part. I hate prayer with adults. It's so awful. I don't want to listen to them pray. I don't want them to react to the way I pray.
Yeah.
The glass house of prayer is so detestable to me. But with those kids, man, do I love it. It's so sweet. It's so sweet.
Huh.
Yeah.
Those are things. I think you're right that the church is going to look different. Not only because of COVID, it was already looking different. Right. It's been looking different.
Sure.
And I was just talking to someone, I won't name the denomination, but here in Michigan, they're going to lay off 20% of their pastoral staff.
Yeah.
And so those people who feel called to ministry, what are they going to do? Just get a job at, Lowe's or something?
They might.
But bivocational. So where do you start church,
Right.
And in my house with my neighbors on my street.
Yep.
And I know this from, being at a church plant. When you don't have a building, you got to have home groups that are more than, chit chat and, one guy spouting off about what he knows from his study notes, right?
Yeah.
It's how are you? The prayer happens. The things happen in people's lives that they can share that you can't share with 800 people,
right?
Right. And I think we're going to have a lot more of that. And
I think that's really good news, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the sort of the Western evangelical diaspora is good news. Push the church out of the building.
Sure. Well, look at it this way. Anytime, the church is being pruned. So the people that aren't coming back, there is a sense in which what gives me hope is those that are staying are really committed. And those that were just want to be entertained or nice coffee or Dave's a funny guy, I think this is a pruning of the church.
It's interesting because one of the things that's hardest for me, Westwinds has always been a real outward-facing church. We've always we introduce a lot of people to Jesus. A lot of hurting people come. We baptize a lot of new believers. So I don't think that missiology happens best on Sunday morning, but I tell you, there's a lot of hurting people that show up to Westwinds looking for hope, and but those are the people that aren't coming back. Yeah. Like I look out over the church now, and I go, almost everybody in the room, these few people, like they all look so healthy. Yeah, like they all love Jesus, trust Jesus, are teaching their kids about Jesus. They all sort of know the basics, and I go, I'm really missing those. I don't know that they were coming to be entertained, maybe. But I go, they were coming because it's like a hospital, and I go, so now I got to send out ambulances. I got to send out
SWAT
teams. SWAT teams. Yeah. I got to go looking for them all over again. That's the. I'm sad about that because it's nice to not have to be running triage every Sunday morning. If it's easier on me. Yeah. But I go, oh shoot! Those people need their pastor. They need their church. Sure. They need something.
Well, I think this is a time where, this is another theme you've heard for 40 years, but, every member is a minister, right? Yeah. And I've pastored 16 years or whatever. And the truth is that the mold that we hired you to do the ministry is a hard one to break.
Yeah, right.
And so somebody's sick, hey, pastor, my mom's sick. Will you go visit her? And it's the expectation. If you don't visit them, you hurt my feelings or you don't care about us. And it's so hard to get that Ephesians 4 model where your job and my job as teacher is to equip and train the saints to do the work of ministry. Yeah. And that's how it builds up and gains maturity. And in a house fellowship, there's an opportunity for that. They're not probably polished, trained educationally or with all the years of experience we have between us. But that's how ministry happens, and it gets spread out. Yeah. And it may not look as professional, but I think one of the reasons the church has, in the last 40 years, declined is we've talked about equipping and training the saints for work of ministry, but we don't identify their gifts. We don't bless them. We don't empower them. We don't send them, as leaders. And that's kind of our role. Is to train, and I think these house fellowships that are going to happen, and even the way we're going to educate ministers in the future, it's going to look different.
Oh yeah.
And I think a lot of places like Westwind will train their own pastors through ministry equipping.
Well, I mean, already if somebody shows up and they say I have a MDiv and I come from whatever denominational background and I'd like to throw my hat in the ring for a job at Westwind, so I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No. I mean, even if they go through and get a D-Min, I mean, depending on where they get it, that their actual hands-on experience with ministry is so zero, and ministry's people. It's people.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, I tell students I got great advice. I got 3 master's, PhD, but here's the thing. I always kept involved in church ministry all the way through. And it changed. I did hospital ministry for a while. I mean, I did children's ministry. I did youth ministry, prison ministry for 3 years. Yeah. You got to stay in touch.
I need all of those.
Yeah. You're and that's where you learn, and even like in youth ministries where I started contemplating, well, how does Christ fit in how Spirit at work in the world? I mean, it was through ministry, you know, and the truth is most of the great theologians of the past were bishops of churches and pastors, and they did not do theological reflection outside of an ecclesial context.
Right.
And
they're not in an ivory tower.
Yeah, it's since the Enlightenment we've got the ivory tower sort of theologian. Students are going to have to be engaged all along the way. Some need to do more reading than doing, and others need to do more doing than reading, because you have both types, right?
What about on this topic? Where do you think the fertile biblical material is for the future? I mean, we come out of this season, whatever it is, with COVID. I mean, how do you prepare for what's next when you don't know what next will be?
Yeah. Well, the church has always lived with uncertainty. Culture shifts. Mm-hmm. Trends shift. 40 years ago, I was given, I think it's this old purpose-driven church.
Yeah.
I won't give that to anybody now. Although there's some really good principles in there. I don't want to trash it, but I'm just saying that model is like, so you always have to keep in step with the Spirit. I think listening to God, discerning God's voice is critical. If you don't know how, and this gets to, if you don't know how to sit in your room alone, how are you going to hear God's voice?
Yeah, right.
And then how do you know it's not you?
Right.
And so I think the church is getting into is in a time, if we take it, of discernment. Mm. And the signs of the times will appear. And I believe the Spirit will burst new kinds of ministries, different shapes and forms, empower us. Well, like Westwinds, I think a lot of churches need to do like, we invested in the hub. We went, instead of,
youth center,
instead of building a mega church, and expecting people to come to it, how do we go to the community and start helping the community? And so with a hub, helping the youth in different ways, there's got to be a lot of creativity, prayer into, where are those areas? Give us eyes to see that. And, the church may not, be in revival and come back. I'm not even sure it's good that most Americans go to church. Kind of like Stanley Hauerwas said, it's not good for people to read the Bible because they get the superficial thing, but it's going to be different. It's going to be honed. There's going to be shifts. It's going to be uncomfortable. It may not look as professional. There'll always be guys like you and me around. Yeah. But I think the troops are going to be in the trenches and not so much in the cathedrals. Well, they'll be around.
Yeah, that's one of the things. One of the shifts that I've been really sensing is we're going back to the catacombs.
I remember when you did that series on the catacombs.
Well, I like the cathedral. I like to visit cathedrals. I don't have any problem with the lights and lasers. I like shows. I like spectacle. I think God can be present in that, but I don't think God requires that, not by a long stretch. And so then I go, People in smaller groups doing more hands-on ministry. I think we're going to see so much more. We need it, man.
Yeah.
And I think you can have both and.
Yeah.
I really hunger for that. Real Christian stuff, Like I tell you, as a pastor, one of the great encouragements is to find out after the fact that ministry happened that I didn't start,
sure,
and in which I wasn't involved.
Exactly.
Like, hey, my friends and I got together. We thought we'd feed the homeless, so we got some soup and went.
Yeah.
Like, what? That's fantastic! Thank God you're a Christian. Thank you for doing that. Like, that's
amazing. One of the things I love. I feel like God is put me in a place to really equip and train others to do ministry. And that's why I'm in teaching. But I even did it when I was a pastor. Many people are in ministry now because I saw their gifts and talents. It gave them a place to serve, and they're out either missionary or doing whatever. And heck, I get news back. They're doing what? Even a lot of the graduates. I'm like, wow, I'm really. It's the biggest reward I get from what I do is realizing. I'm not going to be involved in all this, and my job is to equip and train more. Right. Just makes sense even numerically. I mean, how many people can you actually take care of, Dave? Yeah. How many babies? I mean, how many? You ever babysit 5 babies? No, there's a big mess. So, depending on the people, their maturity, and but really, you might have 1,000 Facebook friends, but I mean, you can only talk to maybe 3 people in depth in a day. Yeah,
and that's a heavy day.
You go home tired, especially as an extrovert.
Yeah. All right, last thoughts. Anything that you go, boy, I sure hope I got a chance to talk about this today with Dave and share this with people.
Actually, I came here with no real agenda. So.
That's good. I didn't really have one in asking. I just thought this would be great.
Yeah, I mean, but with COVID, I guess what I was thinking about during this time too is maybe some of the conflict in churches about governmental expectations. You can't only so many people and as Americans, just my freedoms and all this, and with all the turmoil politically going on, and just I was reflecting recently on the American idea of freedom is freedom from. I can do what I want, whereas the biblical notion of freedom is really freedom for. And one is rather negative. Like, I don't want any restraints. I don't want to be bound. I don't want any commitments. Don't ask me to sign up for something. I want to be free to do what I want to do. And don't even tell me to put a mask on, right? Sure. All this, we have, I think, some of my reflection this time is like, what is biblical freedom? Is freedom, from sin, but for God, for others, freedom to be, to really, it's a different kind of freedom. It's not just, it is committed. It's intentional. It gets involved. It doesn't, the freedom, it's for freedom to Christ that it's free. And there's an abundance if we'll commit to it. There's a freedom that I think we're missing because from the 1776 on, we just, screw you, Britain, we're doing what we want. We just kind of have that attitude. We don't need a king. Well, I think that can translate into radical individualism and not really see right now is a great time to use your freedom for others. Mm-hmm. And just, be praying, maybe who haven't I heard from in a while? Yeah. They might be cooped up somewhere, who needs a dinner? I'll drop it off on their porch if they don't want me to go in, financially. I mean, I happen to be blessed. I'm getting paid. I haven't missed a paycheck. A lot of people, so I upped my giving this past year. Mostly to people and things that I know are suffering. And it's just really hard. But I think, I'm free now. I'm free to do that rather than just feel like,
Well, I had an experience with that at the beginning of COVID, or pretty soon in the beginning of COVID, where I just thought, man, the Bowers are closing in. We can't. At one point, we couldn't have church services at all. So we're filming church in my office. It feels stupid. It's like me and 3 guys and a guitar in my office sitting here. They're just like, this is dumb. And then I realized, I have the freedom to do whatever I want. Not the freedom to be free of your constraints or to ignore whatever. But I go I can reinvent church. I can come up with the breviary. I can come up with special film projects. I can teach classes online. I can do daily Bible studies online. I can do Zoom Bible studies online. I can do whatever I want. There are no restrictions from my noble ambition to serve Jesus and serve others. And so, this last, however long it's been, but I think we've, at this point, the number is 17. We have tried 17 different styles of online church.
Wow. Yeah.
With my team.
Well, I mean, you just pointed to the paradox of what we're living in. Even though we're confined, isolated, everything's closed down. This is when I said, look, be praying about, God, let me see you in the desert. What's opening up that I couldn't see before? I mean, the kind of creativity that I know you push into it. I think everyone could just, what can I, even though I can't do, what I was doing, what now is available,
right?
How can I do it different?
Yeah.
And better, or let's just try stuff.
Yeah.
I've got a freedom to just try.
Looking for opportunity. I mean, when you spend so, and I think that was part of the thing that's so frustrating about lament. Coming back to the beginning of our conversation is you go, if you keep grieving what you've lost, you're never going to see the opportunities in front of you.
Yeah.
And I mean, but there's an appropriate time to grieve,
sure,
an appropriate duration for grief, but there's too much grieving.
Well, there's actually a liturgy of lament that you find in the Psalms. Complaining to God, right? And then you'll find this structure in every Psalm of lament, which is the largest number of Psalms, are laments. But you find the structure in every one of them. There's this calling out to God, just, listing what your grievances are, or you're disappointed, you didn't show up, or, you're doing this. But there's always a shift, that there's some kind of expression of trust. Like you have in the past done this, but every single psalm ends on a note of hope and praise.
Yeah.
And even I will yet praise you. It's future tense.
Yeah.
But if you don't get there, it's just complaining in the wilderness.
Right.
And every psalm does it except Psalm 88. He never gets there. But every Psalm of Lament has those middle
those
pieces where you're remembering where God has worked in the past. And that I think fuels hope for, and I will praise for what you're going to do. And I think that's what Scripture calls a sacrifice of praise. You're not experiencing it.
Yeah.
You're not really experiencing it, but you've got that seed of hope to see it and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would call
a sacrifice of praise, though.
Yeah, a sacrifice of praise, but it's also the liturgy of lament. You got to hit all those points, or it's just complaining and not moving. You're not moving on.
Yeah.
But there's that progression in every one of those, except Psalm 88. He's just too.
Don't be a Psalm 88 church. Don't be a Psalm 88 Christian.
No one ever reads that Psalm in church.
No, we read it over our enemies. Lord. Well, thanks a ton for doing this, man.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Enjoying myself.
Happy to do it. Thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we'll be back at you next week.
All right.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks.